From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
There is, I'm sure, will be rather, a day for discussion of the usual Washington policy debates, but I don't think today is that day.
Let the president know there is support from the other side, us that have been trying to fight to reduce gun violence in this country. Are we going to wait for another massacre? Are we going to have this discussion 6 months, another year, 12, 13, 20, 100 people die? We can't wait anymore.
New York Democratic Congress member Carolyn McCarthy lost her husband 19 years ago in the Long Island Railroad massacre. Her son was gravely wounded. She's become a leading advocate for gun control as pro-gun politicians and lobbies fall silent. Is there a seismic shift that could lead to gun control legislation? We'll ask her. Then we look at the fight to save Social Security as negotiations over the so-called fiscal cliff intensify.
The president believes that the opportunity is there, the parameters of a deal are clear, the path to a compromise is clear, and he hopes that the Republicans will meet him on that path and do something that would be very good for the American people, for the middle class, and for our economy.
We'll speak with Arizona Congressmember Raul Grijalva on his opposition to President Obama's offer to cut more from Social Security than from the military. Then a Democracy Now! Exclusive interview with Native American activist Leonard Peltier from prison.
At the trial, they had admitted racist on the jury. They wouldn't allow me to put up a defense and manufactured evidence, manufactured witnesses, tortured witnesses. You know, the list just goes on. So I think I'm a very good candidate for, after 37 years, for clemency or house arrest.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Obama is expected to announce today Vice President Joe Biden will head a new interagency task force on confronting gun violence in the aftermath of last week's Newtown massacre. The news comes one day after White House spokesperson Jay Carney said Obama will support Senator Dianne Feinstein's bid to reinstate the ban on assault weapons.
He is actively supportive of, for example, Senator Feinstein's stated intent to revive a piece of legislation that would reinstate the assault weapons ban. He supports and would support legislation that addresses the problem of the so-called gun show loophole. And there are other elements of gun legislation that he could support.
The original assault weapons ban expired in 2004, and the National Rifle Association succeeded to date in blocking its renewal. On Tuesday, 2 more students killed in the Newtown attack were laid to rest. Jessica Ricos and James Mattioli, both 6 years old. Another 6 funerals are being held today. Classes have now resumed at most schools in the town, while Sandy Hook Elementary School is still considered a crime scene. The Newtown massacre continues to prompt action at the state level. On Tuesday, Michigan Republican Governor Rick Snyder vetoed a measure allowing firearms into schools and other gun-free zones. In yet another new multiple shooting in the United States, 4 people are dead in Colorado's Weld County after a murder-suicide. The shooter killed 3 adult victims before turning the gun on himself. Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper, meanwhile, has called for strengthening firearms checks in his state to keep guns out of the hands of the mentally ill. We'll have more on gun control and the Newtown massacre with Democratic Congressmember Carolyn McCarthy after headlines. On Capitol Hill, lawmakers have dropped a provision that would ban the indefinite detention of U.S. citizens under the National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA. The Senate approved an amendment to the NDAA last month that would prevent the military from imprisoning any U.S. citizen or permanent resident deemed a terrorism suspect without charge or trial. But according to the New York Times, congressional negotiators have dropped the provision in the effort to merge the bill's House and Senate versions. The overall Defense Authorization Act is expected to come up for a vote this week. The Swiss banking giant UBS has been ordered to pay a $1.5 billion fine for its role in the manipulation of the London Interbank Offered Rate, or LIBOR, which provides the basis for rates on trillions of dollars in transactions across the globe. The rigging of LIBOR meant millions of borrowers paid the wrong amount on their loans. The bulk of the fines, $1.2 billion, will be paid in the U.S., with the rest going to Britain and Switzerland. As part of its settlement, UBS has also admitted to committing wire fraud through its Tokyo branch on LIBOR rates in Japanese currency. At least 9 medical workers have been killed in a series of attacks on a polio vaccination effort in Pakistan. 3 people were killed earlier today near the city of Peshawar, one day after 6 workers, all female, were killed in Peshawar and Karachi. These shootings are believed to be part of a militant campaign against polio eradication in response to the CIA-backed fake vaccination program in Pakistan that helped locate Osama bin Laden. Taliban warlords announced a ban on immunization efforts earlier this year, calling them a cover for espionage. Pakistan is one of 3 countries in the world where polio remains a large-scale risk. The Israeli government has announced yet another new round of settlement expansion in the occupied West Bank, 1,500 new settler homes in East Jerusalem's Ramat Shlomo. It's the latest in a series of Israeli settlement expansions following last month's historic recognition of Palestine as a non-member observer state by the United Nations. The Obama administration, meanwhile, has issued some of its most forceful public criticism of Israeli settlement expansion to date, yet has acknowledged it won't take any practical steps to respond on the ground. After weeks of international calls for a U.S. response to Israeli settlement growth, State Department spokesperson Victoria Nuland criticized Israel Tuesday.
We are deeply disappointed that Israel insists on continuing this pattern of provocative action. These repeated announcements and plans of new construction run counter to the cause of peace. Israel's leaders continually say that they support a path towards a 2-state solution, yet these actions only put that goal further at risk.
Despite the criticism, Nuland went on to acknowledge the Obama administration will leverage none of its political and diplomatic clout with Israel, including billions in annual U.S. aid and veto power at the UN Security Council, to stop the settlements.
You know, if you are deeply disappointed, I mean, next week you can be exceedingly deeply disappointed, but the Israelis will continue to build. What leverage you can actually exercise? I want to ask this because we keep asking, we keep going around this thing.
Would the administration be willing to put this strong language in the Security Council resolution, even though it wouldn't change the situation on the ground?
I don't think we think that's a helpful step at this point.
Okay.
A news crew from the U.S. network NBC has escaped captivity in Syria after 5 days. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel and his production team were seized by a pro-government militia while traveling inside Syria last week. They were blindfolded, subjected to mock executions before ultimately being freed after their kidnappers lost a firefight at a rebel-controlled checkpoint. Shortly after crossing into Turkey, Engel described the ordeal.
We were with some gunmen, some rebels who were escorting us. They executed one of them on the spot. Then they took us to a series of safe houses and interrogation places, and they kept us blindfolded, bound. We weren't physically beaten or tortured. It was a lot of psychological torture, threats of being killed. They made us choose which one of us would be shot first, and when we refused, there were mock shootings.
There are at least 7 other journalists currently missing in Syria, including U.S. reporter Austin Tice. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Nermeen Sheikh. Welcome to our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.
Thanks so much for watching this report from Democracy Now!, your daily independent global news hour. We don't accept advertising or corporate funding, but rather rely on donations from viewers like you. Please make your contribution by visiting democracynow.org. We need your support today to keep bringing you this hard-hitting, in-depth reporting.